Oklahoma, Texas. It is official. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. Best discussion, debate, and analysis right here. This is our weekly SEC live show, soon to be the SEC live show every day. Starting with SEC Media Days, we will be with you live each and every day talking SEC football through the end of the regular season, through the playoffs, through the bowl games, through the national championship game. So we are excited about that. SEC Media Days are about 3 weeks away. And again, we will go live each day during SEC Media Days and then take that all the way through the season. So be looking out for a schedule update, a programming update here at the Voice of College Football involving a number of shows, including the SEC Live Show. Currently, every Tuesday, but again, coming up daily SEC football talk, and with some of your favorite hosts and content creators stopping by. Maybe we'll have a few stop by today as well. Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. When you shop on Amazon, please use the link. So my original intent for today's show was to focus on realignment. You may or may not know that it's Realignment Week here at the Voice of College Football. Realignment Week. So we have made a principled stance here at the Voice of College Football. Don't I sound righteous? A principled stance. Ever since all this realignment business blew up, starting with Oklahoma, Texas a few years ago, and then USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon followed on and on and on, carrying through what we saw with the Pac-12 and the ACC and the Big 12 here in the last year. So we have made a commitment that we will not be on here blabbing away with all sorts of theories, most of which are nothing but that. To be kind, I'm being kind today. I am not going to call them idiotic theories or crap thrown at a fan, but that's what they are. So we will not take part in that, and we never have. We deal with basically two situations. Number one, when there's news, I mean news that's substantiated. So the news breaks, it's happening, this is what it is. USC and UCLA are headed to the Big Ten. It is confirmed. Yes, of course, we're jumping on that. And many of our most popular videos and live streams all time here at the Voice of College Football deal with realignment. You people love it. However, I've not taken abusive advantage of that. So we only deliver content and go live when there is actual news, or number two, news created by a newsmaker, meaning not if Stephen A. Smith says something or somebody like that. I'm talking about when the North Carolina athletic director comes out and says, we need to leave the ACC. A chancellor, an athletic director, a president has made news by making the intent of the university and the athletics program known. That is what I consider to be news. And that is justified to then go forward with that conversation, of course. And then what we specialize here at the Voice of College Football is to take off on that and say, okay, North Carolina to the SEC, what does that look like? We have posted videos where we have taken every program that has moved, Utah to the Big 12, Arizona State, Colorado to the Big 12, for example. And we have talked about, discussed, we have analyzed what that program has done against the Big 12 or that particular conference in the past, what their trajectory looks like currently, and what that looks like toward the future, and how that program will compete. So check out all those videos. Everybody that has moved conferences, we have analyzed their history against that conference and how it projects forward. Then also we will look at the new landscape of that conference and size it up and slice it up into divisions or some type of format with a scheduling format recommendation as well. And so I could not actually believe when we posted some of the videos we did earlier this week. We looked at the Big Ten at 20. We looked at the SEC at 20. So check out those videos that we posted this week. I am just going to be rolling with realignment models this week. They are not my specific predictions. Those are not my personal projections. I am certainly willing to give my predictions. I am not very confident in those predictions, but I will tell you, if you ask me, Mark, what is the Big Ten going to look like in 5 years? I will size it all up and say, this is where I think it's going to land. And these are the percentage chances of a Notre Dame, Florida State, Miami, Clemson, etc., landing in the Big Ten. This is what it's going to look like in 5 years. My confidence level may not be that high. This is not what I do for a living, predicting what schools are going to go to what conference. However, we know scheduling. We know how leagues and conferences should be formatted. And we can look at the landscape of that university, that institution, academically, in terms of media influence, their football program, their athletics program, with a school like North Carolina, where basketball is a big factor. And we have had that conversation on a consistent basis here, the Voice of College Football. So check out the recent videos. Again, we are looking at realignment models this week. We've looked at the SEC at 20 with 4 additions, of course, and the Big Ten at 20 with 2 additions. You will see further videos with different formations of the Big Ten and the SEC coming up today. I hope to get this done, and I should be able to, because my scheduled appointments clear up this afternoon. We are going to look at the best possible Big 12. I thought that that would be a good video topic. What could possibly be the most optimum place for the Big 12 to land with the acquisition of new programs in a feasible, reasonable way? We do not believe that Clemson is headed to the Big 12, for example. So it is not just anybody in the Big 12, let's take the best teams. No, the most feasible, reasonable landing spot that is best possible case scenario for the Big 12. So we're going to work on that video this afternoon, so be looking out for that. We've left the link to call into the show. That is in the chat. So please give me a call. Let's talk college football focused on the SEC. Of course, anything involving the SEC. We can talk about schedules this season. We can talk about personnel. We can talk about 2025 commitments. Those are coming in all the time. I've started a series where I've looked at every team under the Voice of College Football umbrella, and I have run down what my projected win probabilities are. They are not predictions for the season, but I have looked at a number of teams in the SEC, Georgia, Alabama, LSU to start. I'll be going through some other teams, and I have run down their win probabilities according to the Voice of College Football. So check those out as well. But we're going to focus on today. So my first thought today was, well, we're going to take realignment week and, of course, apply it to the SEC. We just posted a video with 4 new entries into the SEC and the SEC at 20. And we're going to get all of your thoughts on where the SEC could land in terms of realignment. And that's going to be the focus of this show. However, I changed the title here in the last half hour because I remembered, I understand we're a day late, but we did not have an SEC show on Monday. So this is a formality. I know, I understand. It's not breaking news. It's nothing fabulous in terms of a shock to anyone, but it is official now. Welcome, Oklahoma. Welcome, Texas, to the SEC. So let's discuss as I look for my welcome banner that I just worked and grinded hard to produce, but I can't find it. Anyway, Simply said, Oklahoma, Texas. Welcome to the SEC. Took about 14 seconds to produce. So before we look at Oklahoma and Texas, let's look through history. So the SEC has been the most forward-thinking conference. Of all the conferences, the SEC has been the most forward-thinking through the great expansion of college football in the 90s and since. I will liken the SEC to the NFL in this way. Many reasons why the NFL dominates the sports landscape in America, dominates the sports landscape to the point where the NFL could care less when anybody else is playing sports. They don't care. They could care less. They will put exhibition games up against if there were championship games played in any other sport in August. They would put their exhibition games. NFL preseason games, their exhibition games. The NFL doesn't care. The NFL is king of American sports, and that is not debatable. That kind of hurts me since I'm an old baseball. I love the NFL. It's one of my favorite entertainment entities ever. I love the NFL, but it's taken over everything. And so my point before we take our first call here would be I'll liken the SEC to the NFL in these two ways. Many of the reasons why the NFL dominates the sports landscape was they just lucked into it. Right place at the right time. For example, or right conditions. An NFL game, a football game is perfect for television. The pace of the game is perfect. Perfect. There's intense action for 7 seconds, and then there's downtime for 20 or 25 seconds while they can show you the replay and discuss the previous play, set you up for the next play. Perfect pacing. Plus, the commercial timeouts, the timeouts between the quarters, all of it. The timeouts after a punt, after a extra point, works out perfectly for a TV show. Perfectly. Many baseball fans will tell you it's better to be at the ballpark than to be watching on TV. I actually disagree with that. I'd rather watch a baseball game on TV. However, I am in the small minority. Most people would say baseball, it's an in-person sport. The NFL and football in general, a perfect TV product. But I need to credit the NFL because much of their success has come from being forward thinking, aggressive in an intelligent, wise way, but they have been out in front of all the other sports in regards to ingenuity, creativity, and forward thinking, taking the next technology and running with it way before everyone else. The SEC has done that in college football. I will leave you with that, and we will take our call from our buddy Ty Hudson from Tusk Talk with Ty, because I'll come back and I'll explain why the SEC has taken advantage more so than any other conference, and it's one of the reasons why. So the I don't know if you heard much of that, Ty, but I was setting up why the NFL rules the American sports landscape, and part of that is because they're so smart and they do things the right way. Part of it was luck. Part of it was right place at the right time or right conditions. I'll say the same thing for the SEC in that the conference is located in the best part of the country to take advantage of dominating the sport. And some people are going to jump on that term domination. I don't believe the league dominates the sport at this point. I think the Big Ten is too strong, too big, too powerful that nobody's dominating, but it is still the number one conference in terms of results on the field. And number one, I think it has been helped by during its explosion, aside from the Atlanta Falcons, the New Orleans Saints, that has been the part of the country that has been void of NFL teams. Before Jacksonville popped up and Carolina and Tennessee, those franchises didn't exist 30 years ago. The SEC took advantage of college football rules the South. There's very little. The NFL, you go to the Big Ten country, it's all over the place. Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Detroit, Green Bay, on and on. Minnesota. But so that's been an advantage for the SEC, the lack of professional sports in the South now. But since people are moving to the South and have since the 80s, obviously population brings professional sports, so it's exploded. But number two, that the SEC has the most football players in the footprint.
Well, now they have Texas.
And now they have Texas. So I'll finally let you talk, Ty. We appreciate you being here.
Oh, no, you're good. I was enjoying it. When I hit the join button, I was watching you, because you can't have the stream up separate and then join StreamYard because then you'll get feedback. But what I heard was before I left that you were talking about Oklahoma and Texas joining the league and how you were maybe a little day late on that. Don't worry, I am too. But I think you're right. There's a geographical advantage for the SEC. And while I think, and I've said this multiple times on these lives and on recorded stuff that we've done together, I think the SEC has slipped a little bit in football. I still think baseball is their strongest sport, and it's not even close, as evident by the College World Series. You had two SEC teams going at it to win the national championship, which has happened before. But football is still a strength. Let's not get it twisted. It is a geographical advantage. Pro sports, it's kind of an afterthought in most of the areas. Arkansas doesn't have a pro team. We don't have the closest thing we have, or obviously the Tennessee Titans or the Dallas Cowboys or the Kansas City Chiefs, or a little bit further.
People love to see those Cardinals in Arkansas, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Cardinal fans are all over the state of Arkansas. I included yours truly here. I'm a big Cardinal fan. But, it's been a big advantage. And now they're adding Texas, which we know that entire state produces just an unbelievable amount of a lot of big-time blue-chip players, a lot of pipelines going in and out of the state of Texas. Arkansas used to be able to take advantage of that back in the day, and I think they want to get back to that. But yeah, it's going to be it's still weird to see the SEC logo and then to see Oklahoma and Texas on that logo. It's weird. It's going to take some getting used to.
Well, I know it's been 30 years, but at some point, we don't necessarily need to talk to you about this, except for the Arkansas slice, of course. Yeah. It's weird to a lot of people of a certain age, not to me. I'm not quite that old, but I do remember a lot of football and did watch a lot of SEC football without Arkansas and without South Carolina, because they joined in 1992 and Arkansas was a staunch member. One of the most successful programs, probably aside from Texas. I would argue that Arkansas was the most successful football program in the history of the Southwest Conference.
Yeah.
And of course, South Carolina came in as an independent. So people of a certain age may still kind of, in a similar way that Penn State, which joined the Big Ten in 1993, is still kind of like, they've been around for 30 years, but they're not like an original, because everybody else in the SEC before that, they were around basically from day one.
Yeah.
This league didn't like add 2, add 3, they all went in together, all 10. I might be off by like a year or two, but pretty much the conference was established like that, all together, Vandy included, everyone. And and now the two with Arkansas, South Carolina in 1992, and then of course Texas A&M and Mizzou 12 years ago.
Yeah, and Mizzou came in, they kind of knocked the door down. I mean, they won the SEC East back-to-back years, and then they vanished. So yeah, Arkansas joined. I was too little. I was 8 years old, 9 when they joined. I couldn't tell you much. I know my very first game, and Arkansas fans are going to hate this, but my very first game was Jack Crow and the loss to the Citadel. That was my very first game that my dad took me to. And he likes to bring that up in my live, or when we talk about my live shows. He's like, yeah, one day I'm going to walk in there and just tell everyone about the Citadel and how you're to blame. And I'm like, and he hasn't done that yet. I've done it for him. I've made it pretty, loud and clear that, that was my first game, and maybe I'm the curse for Arkansas football. I don't know. But since joining the SEC, it's been tough for Arkansas and for South Carolina. Texas A&M is yet to win, or they, didn't win the SEC West and haven't really had that high level of success I think the league thought they would have. They've had some pretty good teams. We know all about the Manziel era, which was, I hate to admit it was fun to watch. Arnie Manziel was a lot of fun.
It was.
But I think I do. That's typically, like the older generation of fans that I talk to, when they pull me aside at Walmart or at a spring scrimmage or whatever, they want to talk about the Southwest Conference days, the good old days when Arkansas was actually relevant in college football, not just once or twice every 4 or 5 years, like consecutively. You think back to obviously Frank Broyles, Lou Holtz had a really good beginning. Ken Hatfield, won his fair share of games in the 80s. And then, joining the SEC hasn't really been great in terms of wins and losses for Arkansas. I read this article a couple of years ago. Jack Crow was talking about a conversation that he had with Frank Broyles about joining the SEC. And I need to find this and pull it up and send it to you. I found it really interesting. Frank Broyles, who of course was the head coach that won the national title for Arkansas in '64, longtime athletic director. He talked to Jack about doing this, about joining the SEC, and Jack Crow's response was, "We have one Texas in the Southwest Conference. We're joining the SEC where there's 2 or 3 of those, teams of that caliber and or higher." So there was kind of it seems like maybe not everybody was on board in Fayetteville about joining the SEC. But like you said earlier, the SEC, I mean, money talks. They've always been it's been a business across the landscape of college football for a really long time. But the SEC always seems to be ahead of the curve. And they added Arkansas and they added South Carolina. They brought on the conference championships. It was a good move for the SEC. It would just be nice if Arkansas could at least not have the kind of years that we had with Chad Morris and then last year with Sam. You sometimes kind of feel like Arkansas got the short end of the stick when it comes in terms of wins and losses. Financially, you love that big fat check you get every year from being in the conference. And now Texas and Oklahoma are going to add to that value. And those are 2 very high value teams that are being added in. So I'm very curious to see how they navigate their first year in the SEC.
Ty, take a little pride in this. While Arkansas is yet to win an SEC championship, being in the league 32 years, they have gone, of course, to 3 SEC championship games. So they've won the West 3 times. Let's see, 1995, 02, 06. That's more than Mississippi State. That's more than Ole Miss. Ole Miss has yet to go to an SEC championship game.
Yeah.
So 2 of the main, what you would consider, I would consider, generally, I know Ole Miss is really good right now and primed for a really big year and were really good last year. But generally, I consider those 3 schools to be on basically the same level. And Arkansas has performed better. At least their highs have been higher than those 2. They've at least gotten to Atlanta 3 times.
Yeah. And they've produced their fair share of, the accolades have come through here. When you're looking at the Heisman candidate, they had Darren McFadden back-to-back. That's always nice. That's a good plus, that you used to use on the recruiting trail. It's been so long ago now. You've had Mackey Award winners. They've done pretty well. Obviously, basketball was throughout the 90s was Arkansas's claim to fame, while Danny Ford and the Razorbacks were really struggling in the 90s. Other than an SEC championship appearance with Barry Lennon Jr. quarterback getting throttled by Steve Spurrier and the Gators. But so they've had their fair share of on-field success. It just lately it's been a little more dramatic and a few more L's on the schedule. And I think this year it's gonna, again, I said Texas and Oklahoma are going to be fascinating to see how it all unfolds for them. The same can be said for Arkansas. Can they turn it around? Bobby Petrino being the offensive coordinator, he's back. You've got this 6'6" dual threat quarterback and Taylon Green. This is probably, I'm excited for football this year, but for so many different reasons, because of the conference expansions, or the what we've seen as far as the carousel with these teams coming and going in these conferences. But within the SEC alone, it's so fascinating, and it's going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, one more note on history before we jump back with you to 2024. Yeah, had not Arkansas taken the offer from the SEC, and of course, that was the smart offer to make. Yes, they would have won more football games in the Big 12. They would be in the Big 12. I'm sure the Big 12 would have loved to have had Arkansas. So they would have gone into the Big 12, just like some of their Southwest Conference colleagues, Texas and others. And I'm sure they would have won more. Now, there was still Texas for much of that time being a dominant program. And for almost that entire time, Oklahoma ruled the Big 12. So I don't know that Arkansas would have won championships in the Big 12, but I'm sure that you could tack on a win or two or three to their records, many of them throughout the years. Those Houston Nut teams might have done something big.
That's one of the pillars of off-season talk every year. Should Arkansas have joined the Big 12? Should they join the Big 12? Is there a possibility with all this conference expansion that the SEC, with all the money they're cutting up, between the amount of teams that they have, is there a time when the SEC decides they want to trim the fat? I mean, corporations do this all the time, and if you don't think the SEC or these college football, these conferences that they don't approach this as corporations, you're crazy. Of course, this is a billion-dollar industry. Could they eventually cut and trim the fat, and would Arkansas be a part of that? And how much money? What are their ticket sales, merch sales? How competitive is Arkansas in football lately? Not so great. I'm not suggesting that they're going to kick Arkansas to the curb. I think Arkansas brings plenty to the table. But that's one of those pillars of conversation that I have on my show often. Should Arkansas should they have joined the Big 12, and then what would that have looked like? And one argument that I always make about that is, while I do think they probably win, I mean, it just depends, a game or two more a year. We've got to remember, it sure is awfully nice in that era to walk into a kid's house with an SEC pin on your jacket or whatever, or your hat, your hog hat with the SEC emblem on the side of your ball cap. That's a huge advantage. That goes away when you join a conference like the Big 12, who, by the way, and I take a lot of cheap shots at the Big 12. I think it would be a lot of fun if Arkansas did go back, when Texas and Oklahoma were there. Now it's kind of like it would be pointless. And obviously they wouldn't do that anyways because of the financial reasons and what comes with being in the SEC when you get those $50 million checks. They're not going to leave that behind. It would have to be the SEC making that decision.
Yes.
But it's always a fun topic. I think you still wind up with great players no matter if you're in the SEC or the Big 12, like Cedric Cobbs, Matt Jones, Peyton Hillis, Darren McFadden. I think you still are able to bring those guys, to Arkansas no matter what conference you're in. And what would the product look like on the field? How much different would things be? They would probably be trying to join the SEC right now. If I'm being honest, that's probably where they would be. They would want in. They'd be knocking on the door where they can go make some money, because this is where it's at. And between them and the Big Ten, right? These are, to me, there's only two power conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC. Everyone else is just kind of fighting for some form of relevancy. They'll get into the playoffs, but how many teams will be getting into the playoffs out of those, what I think are now like group of fives? They're not Power Five.
That is funny that you say that is a topic of frequent conversation every offseason, because that I never thought of it that way. I never thought, and I should have, for as much college football history as I think about, I never really considered, okay, Arkansas in the Big 12. Man, that sounds like a video I should work on. Because
I have considered it. I really have. I've even have like a script kind of semi written out, like, what are the pros and cons? And obviously going to Texas and recruit with an SEC pin on your, like I said, having that as your cape is a really nice advantage, and you lose that. You're going to lose financial advantages as well. But I do think they probably would be more successful. You wouldn't have that tough, unbelievably tough grind in the SEC. So you would imagine that would equate to more wins. But I don't know, how big of a hit does recruiting really take? Or I also have a philosophy, and I don't know how you feel about this, where you should play where you recruit where you play. So then obviously you're in Texas recruiting and playing all the time. Maybe you would actually have a stronger foothold in the state of Texas, which is a pipeline for Arkansas, and it has been for decades in the Fort Worth, Dallas area. So maybe it's actually, strengthened if they were in that league in terms of being able to recruit the state of Texas.
Going forward, you can be the fourth best team in the SEC. Maybe we'll see some years. Lindy's predicting this year, the fifth best team in the SEC, and make the playoff. If you're in the Big 12, you win the championship. Of course, you get to the playoff. If you're in second place, you probably get to the playoff. Oklahoma State lost the Big 12 championship game last year. They were the second place team in the Big 12. They would not have come anywhere close. They lost 4 games. They lost the conference championship game by 4 touchdowns. They were not going to a playoff. But Arkansas playing the likes of Arizona and Colorado and Arizona State every week. Not that there aren't good teams in the Big 12. Big 12 fans are going to be all over me for this. This Arkansas team this year, I'm not saying that they would do great things in the Big 12. But the thing is all those teams, aside from the couple worst teams in the Big 12, which are probably Cincinnati, Houston, and then at the top, Utah's probably the best. Kansas State, Oklahoma State are probably right there. All that middle is just, who knows?
It's fluff.
So they could finish third or fourth in the Big 12, and maybe
it's
better.
Funny. Wet Blanket says Big 12 doesn't want Arky dead weight. I think you're kidding yourself if you think that. Like, no, Arkansas actually brings quite a bit to the table. No. We haven't even talked about the money that's in this region in the area, and it's a growing area, big time. No,
they just took
Big 12 would love
Arizona and Arizona State.
Yeah, they took
BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF. They are taking Arkansas.
Yeah,
they are running to Fayetteville to shake their hands and sign the papers.
I wonder how long, and I know we're kind of hating on the Big 12 right now. I just wonder how long that conference sticks around. Like, do they get, is there enough buying power there? Cincinnati at the time, they were red hot when they were trying to bring them into the Big 12. They were red hot, and we all knew that eventually that was going to die off. BYU's kind of hit or miss every year. You don't really know what you're getting. That's not a large area in terms of, unless you're Utah, in terms of getting eyeballs to watch television. BYU fans are diehard, though. I got a lot of respect for BYU fans. Colorado's a hot commodity right now, but how long does that last? So I don't know. Oklahoma State, they're rabid. That's the one thing the Big 12 has. They have rabid, really loyal fans. And I know someone's going to take a shot at me for that later, but they are very loyal. And I know Oklahoma and Oklahoma State fans and Texas fans, they love their conference. They love their teams. And that's another reason why I think it would be pretty interesting fit, because Arkansas fans are no different with the Razorbacks. But yeah, I wonder how long that conference sticks around. I could be wrong. They've been dead in the water twice, right? They nearly about a decade ago fell apart. And I think that's going to come again. I think here in the next 5 or 6 years, we're going to be reading about more teams bolting to go elsewhere, maybe going independent or whatever.
Okay. Well, Ty has probably surpassed me as being on the hit list for Big 12 people, because they come after me all the time, but I'm not predicting the Big 12's demise. I think the Big 12 is safe.
I don't know. I mean, what was it about a decade ago when with Oklahoma and Texas?
Yeah, the Pac-12,
the Longhorn Network, it nearly crumbled before our eyes. And at the time, that was shocking to me, because I thought, wait a minute, Oklahoma, Texas, TCU, they've got some quality teams. What's happening? And now they've lost Texas and Oklahoma. There are no mainstays when you talk about teams that you expect to be in the playoffs every year, maybe outside of, I don't know, maybe maybe TCU, who did make the playoffs not that long ago. And I don't know that they're a mainstay in the playoffs. I don't know. Now, basketball, that's a different story. I change my tune when it comes to basketball because that's a very good basketball conference. But football, I'm just not there, Mark. I'm not impressed with that conference. Again, they added Cincinnati, which is kind of a dud in my opinion. UCF will be interesting as long as Gus Malzahn's there. And to be fair, they've actually made some good hires, back to back with head coaches there at UCF, but they're not a very relevant. They're relevant within where they play. I don't know that they're relevant outside of the state of Florida. I don't know. I don't think they have a whole lot of buying power. I think within the next 5, maybe 10 years, I think we're going to have the same conversation about the Big 12 possibly falling apart. I hope I'm wrong, and here's why. I don't want college football to come down to the Big 10 and the SEC. I don't want that. I don't think that's good for the health of college football, for the game. I want the Big 12, the ACC, once upon a time ago, the Pac. Of course, we know what's happening there. I want these other conferences to be a part of the fray, to be P5, to be truly P5, and to make the game interesting. That's what makes college basketball so interesting. When you got March Madness and you've got these teams from all over that are competing to get that trip to the Elite Eight and the Final Four and maybe to have a shot at winning the big one. That's what makes it so fun. When you have all these different teams from across the country, maybe you kind of forget about briefly, and then you're like, oh my God, look at the talent they have. Look what they've got going on over here. I think that's better for the health of college football. I want the Big 12 to be competitive. You got Arkansas and Oklahoma State, this year, and I most fans know where I'm at with that. I think Oklahoma State's probably going to rip Arkansas apart, but could Oklahoma State do that in a week-to-week basis? And how many teams out of the Big 12 right now could honestly survive the gauntlet of a Big 10 or an SEC schedule? I don't think any of them. Maybe 1 or 2 at the most, as far as, being in the playoff picture now that we have this expansion. But I want all these teams to be competitive, Mark. I do. Someone might think I have some personal vendetta against Big 10 SEC schools. That's not true. I want them to be competitive. I just, right now, the way things are going with college athletics, I just wonder how long they survive as a conference.
But listen to what you're saying. You are taking the second or third best team in the Big 12 and saying that they're going to beat the 15th, 14th, 13th best team in the SEC. This should not be some kind of radical statement, but you almost have to. I'm not 100% convinced that Oklahoma State's going to win that game. I think that they will. They should win the game.
Yeah.
But the second or third best team in the Big 12 is going to beat the 14th best team in the SEC. Big deal. So that's not a glowing endorsement for the strength of the Big 12.
But again, I also, I don't think Oklahoma State would survive the gauntlet of the SEC.
Yeah.
That's kind of the point that I'm making. They will beat Arkansas, and maybe I'm blowing it open with saying something like they're going to eradicate the Razorbacks. It could be pretty competitive. We know early on in the year, Oklahoma State loses some bizarre games early in the season. Maybe Arkansas catches them napping. That is at 11 o'clock in the morning at their place. So maybe I'm wrong there, but I still think I just don't know that anybody out of that conference is capable of having a whole lot of success with a Big 10 schedule or an SEC schedule. And I think that speaks to what's happening in that conference. There's just not a lot of staying power. I could be wrong. Maybe the Big 12 just explodes this year, and maybe we do see BYU and I don't know, Cincinnati, some of these new additions finally kind of hold up their end of the weight in that conference. But I'm just not impressed with them. And again, that sucks because I want them to be good. But I think they got a little ways to go, and that makes me wonder. We know football, as you and I are very well aware, football is, they subsidize the rest of the athletic department, right? They get those big checks from the conference every year, and that helps to upgrade the facilities across the campus. So, yeah, we'll see. But there's again, going back to Oklahoma and Texas, former Big 12 schools. By the way, I think they're both going to do well in the SEC this year. I think both of them are going. In fact, I think Oklahoma might surprise people. I keep hearing SEC fans talk about how Oklahoma's going to get trashed. welcome to the SEC. I think Oklahoma might be better than people realize. And it shouldn't be that shocking considering they weren't that bad last year.
Oklahoma is one of the 15 to 20 best teams in the country, in my estimation. Just released my top 25, folks, that actually makes sense. So check it out. That is just simply the 25 best teams in the country. Big 12 fans, want to make this very clear. I love your conference. I love watching your conference. I love the teams in your conference. I want you to stay around for a million years. I love your conference. However, I speak the truth. I speak the truth. So none of the stuff that leaves these lips on these videos and live streams can be really debated much about the status of the conference. The conference was able to protect itself. Basically, the ACC is in trouble because they have 2 or 3 or 4 programs that are either elite or they have the potential to be elite, or in North Carolina's case, they have other academic and basketball components that are very impressive and attractive.
The ACC should be.
The Big 12 was protected, Ty, by its mediocrity.
Yeah.
Basically, nobody wants anyone in the Big 12. The Big 10 doesn't want anyone in the Big 12. The SEC doesn't want anyone in the Big 12. Now, the ACC, and that's a whole other deal. But anyway, the Big 12 was protected and survived by its mediocrity.
I agree with that.
People don't like me to say that, but that's what happened.
Well,
and just to fill in some people on the point that you made earlier, because I don't know that a lot of people know about the situation roughly 10 years ago, was we could be sitting here. We were very close to be sitting here today with the Pac-12 being the other, like there being a power 3 and the Pac-12 being that third with Texas and Oklahoma. Colorado's still there and so forth. And the Big 12 being annihilated.
Yeah. Yeah, they were, I don't know I think some people blame the Longhorn Network, and it was all over the place. It was wild. And it took me by surprise at the time, because I remember thinking the Big 12, I mean, they're great. They've got, well, maybe not great, but they're a solid conference. And that shocked me. And, you're pulling up Twitter and you're reading it like the Big 12 could be done with, could be over with. But yeah, I'm like you. And I know I don't have very many Big 12. I don't have a lot of Big 12 traffic on my channel, but I do have some friends that are Arkansas fans / Oklahoma State or Oklahoma or Texas fans. I know that's weird. One of my moderators is literally a Texas fan / Arkansas fan. I don't know how that's possible, but I that's about the only Big 12 traffic I get. But I'm sure someone's gonna come at me. That's fine. I've got thick skin. I can handle it. It's just an opinion, people. It's just a take. It's going to be okay. College football, EA College Football 2.5 drops in like 2 weeks. We should all just be excited, come together, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, and get ready to play the hell out of EA College Football 2.5, baby. You can make whatever conference you want on that game, I think. So I'm really excited about that. Maybe I'll combine the SEC and the Big 12, Mark. Maybe that's what I'll do. And then we can all just sing Kumbaya together and play some online Dynasty on EA College Football 2.5.
I know I'm excited about the video game release. I'm ecstatic.
Oh man,
I'm just kidding. Actually, I've not played a video game since my kids were like 5 years old.
Well,
or maybe
people of all ages. I've had older people and younger people and everyone.
No interest in video games. We have these video game simulations on our channels that somebody else produces, and I get comments about them all the time. And I say, I know nothing about that. I don't watch it. I have no idea it's going on.
Yeah. Oh man, it's almost like a religion. I'm so excited for it to be back. I really am.
So Big 12 fans, we love you. And we've got a Big 12 channel, so please subscribe there. And then also keep in mind that what we're doing here with the SEC live show and with the Big 10 live show, we want to do with the Big 12 as well. But there's only one of me, so I will not be hosting most likely the Big 12 show. But if you have any recommendations, you yourself want to host a Big 12 show and have the chops to do it, we want to have a Big 12 show here at the Voice of College Football. So please contact me at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Or if you want to host the SEC show and I got to move over to the Big 12, I will talk Big 12 football every day. Whatever. So
Just can't have me on at all. Don't do that. You might really get some hate mail.
Hey, anything to stir things up. Ty, before we let you go,
Yeah.
If there's anything involving Arkansas recruiting or anything else that you want to take off on involving the Hogs, I know everything else is super quiet right now, but
yeah, it's that time of year, talking season and whatnot. Not a lot going on. Hoping to get maybe a commit here pretty soon, but the recruiting class is it's not horrible, right? I mean, it's still like a top 30, top 35 class, but in the SEC, it's bottom. I mean, it's bottom 3, bottom 4 in the conference, which is part of the reason what makes this conference so challenging is the uphill battle you have when you're talking about what these other schools like LSU, lately Ole Miss, despite having a bunch of decommits not long ago, the Alabamas, Auburns, Georgias of the world, having to compete against them within your conference all the time for recruiting. It's tough. But thankfully the portal they've done okay in the portal, but yeah, it's kind of slow right now. The most excitement anybody gets anymore in our Discord and Tuss Talk Discord is usually when we bring up EA College Football 2.5 or online Madden. We've got a league right now, an online dynasty league, with quite a few people in it actually. So that's kind of carried us, but yeah, it's all basketball. I mean, let's just be real. Arkansas might be coming back to that. We are a basketball school kind of, that might be their presence now with Musselman gone to USC and bringing in a Hall of Fame coach like Coach Calipari. That's really all the talk right now. Football's a little slow, but I think it'll pick up. Obviously, we're getting really close to fall camp. So, and Arkansas plays in the month of August. So, I mean, once we get there, we're there, man. Once you hit August, now it's game month, just like that. So it'll pick up for sure here very soon.
Tusk Talk with Ty. It's right here on YouTube, folks. Get on over there. Check out Ty's work. Talking Hogs all the time. Ty, appreciate you answering the call. Appreciate you being here.
Appreciate it, Mark. Thanks for having me on, man.
Pete Thamel reporting via our buddy D-Rock Irish. Thank you so much for the report here. Utah State has informed the football team coach Blake Anderson is on administrative leave and unlikely to return. Defensive coordinator Nate Dreiling has been named the interim coach. Blake Anderson had some issues with his wife a few years ago, and I believe she passed away, unfortunately. I don't want to misreport that in any way, but he's had some personal issues that has caused him to step away from, he was the head coach at Arkansas State, and has joined us a few times here at the Voice of College Football. So we certainly hope for the best and pray for the best for Coach Blake Anderson of Utah State. All right. We've got Kyle Lumis stopping by to talk some Auburn football. Kyle,
how's it going?
I'm good.
I'm just hanging in through summer, just trying to, as you said, and as Ty said, we are in talking season, so we're just finding things to talk about at this point. But it'll be here very soon. I'm shocked though that you don't even indulge in College Football 25, the video game. I find that shocking. That seems right up your alley, Mark.
It may, but no, it doesn't. Yeah, I played video games from the time I was about 10 to about maybe not even 20.
Yeah.
Maybe not even 20 years old. I kicked the habit. No, don't have time for video games. Don't care. And then, then I had a son and he got into video games. So I played video games with him. And my son, at the height of loving video games at like 15 or 16 years old, just came down one day, had it all stacked up, said, sell it, get rid of it, give it away, do whatever you want. It's wasting my time. Hasn't touched a video game basically since. That was like 10 years ago. So
I wish we had that willpower as adults sometimes. I've been looking forward to this day. Well, it's not here yet, but the day that's coming in 2 weeks for a decade now, it seems like. That is the one thing that I indulge in the video game world is college football. And I am so tired of replaying the last copy, NCAA 14. I I've taken Auburn greats from lows of lows to Texas State national championships, eventually going back to their alma mater to win a national championship with Auburn so many times. I'm so ready to have a new version of it. But it's not for everybody, but it gives us something to talk about during this season, definitely.
Oh, I know it's caused an uproar here in the last few days. People getting upset about EA's offensive and defensive rankings and their most difficult places to play, best environments, however it's been phrased. I don't know where Auburn stands on those lists or what your reaction is.
The ratings in terms of offense, defense, and overall, I'm not really going to debate because we don't know what this Auburn team is going to look like, and that's obviously going to reflect in some of their things. Now, they are rated as an 86 out of 100 or 99, I guess technically the highest you usually see is 99. Is their defense is 86, which is okay. It's good enough. It's probably a little bit surprising. Offense, they're not even in the rankings, so they're going to be probably lower in the low 80s or anything like that. Overall, probably even somewhere in those low 80s too. But what you brought up, the toughest places to play article rankings that they put out, in their opinion, Auburn finds themselves in 14th on that list, and that caused quite an uproar, a conversation piece last week. There are a lot of people on that list that deserve to be above Auburn. I'm not going to argue that in any way, but there are a lot of people that do not deserve to be above Auburn in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Some of those, in my opinion, humble opinion, no bias here whatsoever, would be the likes of Oregon, the likes of Wisconsin. And I'll go ahead and stir it up since we're welcoming Oklahoma and Texas into this equation. I will even say more than Oklahoma as well. So 14th, it's not anything to get mad about, but Auburn should definitely be much closer to the top 10 in terms of overall college football atmospheres. And if you want to ask anybody about that resume, just go ask Alabama and Georgia because they have a tough time coming in there and getting out without being bruised a little bit.
Certainly last year they did. And to Kyle's point, year after year after year after year, or as is the case to be more accurate, every other year, every other year, every other year. So when you bring up 14th, yeah, that strikes me as extremely low for Auburn. I would think in the 5 to 10 range.
I want to say that, but then I get accused of pulling down the orange and blue glasses and not being unbiased. So I'm comfortable if they just want to put us at 10 in the top 10. I think you can still make a very strong argument for closer to the top 5, as you just pointed out. But I'm trying to be a little less biased here. So,
However, that said, when you bring up Oregon and Wisconsin, I think those are extremely formidable college football venues and atmospheres.
And I agree that they're formidable, but when we talk about apples and orange, or not apples and oranges, when we are talking apples and oranges, when we're talking about comparing the two in the South and the SEC, give me a night game in Jordan-Hare with a primetime opponent, and frankly, with any opponent. If you haven't seen the atmosphere that was the Auburn Texas A&M game after Coach Harsin had been fired with then interim head coach Cadillac Williams at the helm, then you just missed out on a great college football environment. Even if you couldn't be there on the TV, it was absolutely electric. And that's a team that had no hopes, dreams, aspirations for a bowl game, anything like that. It was just all about what we talk about here at the E2C Network, the Auburn experience. And it shined brighter than any stadium that night, in my opinion.
All right. I would continue to play devil's advocate because sure. I completely agree with you. Now, I've not experienced an Auburn. Yeah, during my travels through the SEC, did not go to Auburn, but it's well known, documented, understood by college football fans who know anything about college football that on the Plains is an extremely special experience and difficult place to play. Absolutely. I just think that you've got a glut of amazing environments and experiences from both the Death Valleys to Wisconsin to Ohio State to Auburn to all over the place.
Yeah.
Tennessee, etc. That it's so difficult to differentiate them because if we had a Wisconsin media or fan here or an Oregon fan, they would give us their version of we did this and we did that, and look at this game and look at the jump around entering the fourth quarter, and that's iconic, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, I would counter their jump around with a fourth quarter swag surf, which I know is overused now, but Auburn made it pretty big to start off with, and then everybody else started copying us. There's a lot of things out there that Auburn started, and people aren't aware of that they kind of took that and ran with it. And, anyway, I mean, I would venture to say we're the first one to fly a bird. The Eagles, I can't vouch for how long Air Force has been flying their Falcon. I think Georgia Southern has attempted something like that as well. So our traditions, they're definitely very unique, and they stand out. And whether we're talking about Tiger Walk, we're talking about the Eagle Flight, doing swag surf at the beginning or in the middle of the fourth quarter. We do that even if we're losing at that point. If it looks at it, it's a fun time to be in Auburn. And whether we're talking about this ranking or somebody else's ranking about the college football best environments, there's always going to be disagreements. But I think if you pull back the bias out of all that, you're going to find yourself having a hard time not putting Auburn in the top 10, even if it is right at top 10.
Kyle Lumis here from E2C Network, and you can catch everything Auburn there at E2C Network right here on YouTube. The current recruiting situation is 13th in the rankings. I don't think that's very important here at the end of June, beginning of July. Right. Eric Winters is a safety out of Enterprise, Alabama, the fifth rated player at his position in the country.
Yep.
The top 50 player nationally. He just committed here in the last 10 or 15 days. And then I see a running back, Alvin Henderson, also out of the state of Alabama, is a top 15 player at the running back position. And so those look to be the two latest commits.
Yes, those are the two latest commits and the biggest commits, the ones that are kind of holding some of the Auburn faithful at bay from falling off a cliff right now. There's been a pair of decommits, one at the offensive line position, Carday Smith, and then we also lost a linebacker, Tyler Lockhart. Folks, we are just so early in this game. If you're panicking about the decisions of 17 and 18-year-olds, don't. It's a long process. There used to be a day, Mark, if somebody flipped or decommitted, they did it once and that was it. But Auburn's seen one person they flipped and go back to where they were originally already way, way earlier in this class, way earlier than we should have even been talking about it. So if you're panicking right now as an Auburn fan, don't. You got a lot of great things that are already in this class. It's got a long way to go. You brought up Eric Winters, one that took a long time to get the actual commitment out of, and after a great recruiting weekend, they were able to get that. Same thing with Alvin Henderson, being able to pull him away from Penn State, where I'm sure that was going to be an interesting dynamic, him coming all the way from Enterprise, Alabama, all the way up to Pennsylvania, but he's staying home with Auburn. So I'm not too worried about this recruiting class right now. Still plenty of time.
Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football, everyone. We welcome your comments and questions there in the chat. We got Kyle Lumis here talking Auburn football. And yes, video games. And July 19th is the date for EA Sports to unveil the much anticipated college football game and Auburn recruiting. Kyle, appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
Unless you've got anything else that you wanted to offer, we just wanted an Auburn update out of you.
Well, the only thing that I will say is with Oklahoma and Texas joining yesterday, I'm not going to speak for every SEC fan or every Auburn fan, but I personally am super excited about this. And there's an increasing amount of conversation around this Auburn-Oklahoma matchup in Week 5. And that's coming from both sides. I just heard today another Auburn fan that had crossed paths this weekend with an Oklahoma fan, and they were asking them, we're really excited to come to Auburn for this first time to experience the town, to experience what you guys are like. There's a lot of interest generating around that. The one thing that is disappointing is that they can't be that primetime game because Alabama, Georgia is the same night. We all know that's going to take the viewership in that spot. But this one's building, and I think you're going to have quite not just the showing in Jordan-Hare, for the game in terms of fans, but just it's going to be a great matchup. There's a lot of excitement brewing around this one, and for good reason.
When you bring up Georgia, Alabama playing and Auburn and Oklahoma playing on the same day. Now, we have had this situation in the SEC for years and years and years where you can look at specific Saturdays and be like, wow, I want to see about 4 games. But of course, that's been amplified with the entries of Oklahoma and Texas, where I'm sure if we went week to week through the SEC, there are weeks that are just ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah. And that's going to be one of those where you have those two. If I remember, I looked through that week 5 schedule a lot. And there's some probably maybe sneaky good matchups, or at least just intriguing storylines around matchups. But the two that week are going to be Georgia and Alabama, clearly, and Auburn, Oklahoma. Just because it's Georgia and Alabama, they've been, the 2 biggest out of the SEC in that narrative. Then you've got this brand new thing happening with Oklahoma and Auburn. So one's going to be in the afternoon. That's Auburn, Oklahoma. One's going to be at night. There's not going to be any overlap there. Like I said, the one shame is that Auburn and Oklahoma can't happen at night in Jordan here. I'm hoping and I'm praying that random whiff of cool fall air that sometimes comes through Alabama in late September just for a week hits during that, so we can have just a perfect college football Saturday.
Now, the one thing that comes to mind when I think about new matchups is my mind, unfortunately, while most people are forward thinking, mine thinks to the past. Okay, what are the historical matchups there? So what comes to mind is, okay, I was thinking Auburn, Oklahoma. When have they played? Oh yeah, they played in the 2016 Sugar Bowl.
Yep.
Baker Mayfield, Oklahoma won that game.
Yeah.
Then they, against Texas, I don't believe that they've played since the 83 season.
Yep, that's correct.
A season in which I believe, I don't know that we've ever gone down this path, Kyle, that I believe Auburn should claim a national championship.
Absolutely, they should have. And in some ways, we kind of have, I believe. It's interesting. If you go to Auburn's website, you're going to find, obviously, the two that there's no disputing over, 1957 and 2010. But there's, I believe, 2 more now that are up there. And if I'm not mistaken, 1983 is one of those. I could be wrong on that. So there's been this push for the longest time that Auburn should claim that 1983 national title. If you do your research on that, you'll be asking yourself the same question: why were they not named the national champions? It's a no-brainer. I can't remember the exact details of who lost to who and why that and who.
I can.
Do you want to lay it out for everybody?
Well, my perspective is a little bit different. So, Kyle, I'm not going all the way to your end of the spectrum.
Sure.
We go through a process here at the Voice of College Football where we go through every year and say, okay, this is who was voted the national champion. Was that fair? Was it equitable? Are there other teams who have a resume? And so what I tend to do is pre-BCS era clearly, and even in the BCS era, add 2 national championships. I rarely take some away. I have taken some away to say, why is Colorado the 1990 national champion? They tied a game. They lost a game. They were given a 5th down to win another game. They were giving a clipping penalty to win another. They really lost 3 games. They're not the national champion. That's a bit rare, as opposed to me saying 1983, Miami was voted the national champion. They went 11-1. They beat the team that everyone was talking about as the greatest of all time, Nebraska, in the Orange Bowl. Auburn went 11-1 as well. They played a schedule, folks, that was unbelievably difficult.
Yep.
Like, they played an SEC schedule. Then they're like tacking on Texas and Maryland, who was like a top 10 team. They're like, their non-conference schedule was like playing 3 other SEC games. Like, it's a ridiculously difficult schedule. They navigated that to 11-1, beat a Michigan team that was 7th or 8th in the country in the Sugar Bowl. But you also have this issue. If Auburn can claim a national championship, which I believe they can, Texas should be able to claim a national championship as well. They finished 11-1. They beat Auburn head-to-head by 2 scores at Auburn. But I think one of the hangups people have, Kyle, is they treat bowl games like they're playoff games. They were just another game. So since Texas lost to Georgia by 1 point on a muffed punt with like 4 minutes left in the game, they take Texas out of the equation. I don't think that's fair to Texas. I don't treat bowl games. They're not playoff games. It's just an additional game. So in my Voice of College Football book of national champions of 1983, it's Auburn, it's Texas, it's Miami.
And listen, we've got several years where there's co-national champions, and I'm fine with sharing it in the title a little bit if that's what it takes to get the official claiming of that. I tried to do some quick Googling real quick, and it depends on where you look at. I don't know that 1983 is listed on Auburn's official site. I'm struggling to find that page. But I agree with you. Whether you look at your metrics or whatever way you look at it, Auburn should be able to claim that 1983 national championship. And hopefully, if it's not done so already, in due time, because if you've looked at some of Alabama's national championships, you'll wonder why they claimed a few.
This is true. I would also claim a national championship in 2004 if I was Auburn.
That's another one. You know, you're just bringing up all the ones we should, could have, would have, should have. We can make cases all day about 2004, about 1983, about probably some in the 19 teens as well. By the way, just a quick aside here. If anybody's ever wants to do a deep dive into Auburn lore, go look up Iron Mike Donahue, or Mike Donahue is his name, but he's known as Iron Mike, and his legendary time at Auburn. He had quite the resume. Now, that's way back in the weeds, but I've been saying it for a long time in the Auburn family. Put some respect on Mike Donahue's name. He's got a street named after him by the stadium, after all. But anyway, claiming national titles, yeah, Auburn's got a case for a lot of them, and hopefully that'll continue to be a more prevalent thing they do and make a bigger deal about it in the coming years.
I'll end it with this, Kyle, unless you have anything else to add. As I posted on X the other day, Michigan claims 4 national championships, and they have every right to do this, but let's understand that 4 of these national champions, they have 10 national, 12, whatever they've got. But 4 of them they claim, and again, I have no issue with them claiming them, but it should be understood that 4 of those occurred before there was a legal forward pass in college football. Can we really even consider that to be the same sport?
Definitely changes the game, literally.
They were basically playing rugby with guys that weighed 120 pounds. So, yeah.
That's a great point. It's definitely a different game when you think about it from that perspective. So we can dice this up and slice it up no matter which way. The great thing is this just gives us great things to talk about in the offseason and continue to speculate and argue and, support our positions on things like who deserves to have what national title.
Well, Kyle, we appreciate you being here as always. You're welcome every week.
Thank you.
E2C Network, everyone, for Auburn discussion over there on a regular basis. All right, Kyle, have a great week.
You as well. Thank you. War Eagle.
Let's get Adam in here. Adam has called and waited patiently. Adam, so sorry about that, but we like to give the floor to our guests in the media.
Of course, no problem at all, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine. How are you?
Okay. I was thinking about the SEC, and I decided to look at the last 100 years in terms of SEC teams that have won the national championship in 10-year increments. From 2013 to the present, 60% of the national champions have been from the SEC. From 2003 to 2012, it's been 80%. Then starting in 1993 to 2002, it's 20%. 83 to 92 is 10%. 73 to 82 is 40%. 63 to 72 is 20%. And 53 to 62 is 30%. 43 to 52 is 10%. 33 to 42 is 0%. And 23 to 32 is 30%. Meaning that in the last 100 years, 20% of the national champions have been from the SEC. So I guess my point is that unlike the last 20 years, I see the SEC potentially losing its dominance. And I think that could be attributable to a few factors. The motivation to attend a program is going to be based more on money than on prestige. I think ultimately that with realignment, teams are going to have multiple losses. And I think starting this year, we're going to see something really, really different. I'm not sure if it's going to. I think it's going to be a team that's going to win the national championship that we're not considering. And I think, in part due to realignment, in part due to NIL, we're going to see a dominant conference emerge. So my question to you is, if you had to kind of extrapolate, what do you think that team might be this year that no one's talking about, and what conference do you think in the coming years do you think is the one that might supplant the ACC as the dominant conference in college football?
So the first note that I will make, not to criticize your metrics, but just to make this consideration that there are, so if you were listing off, let's say, Super Bowl championships, then that percentage would be lock, stock, barrel. But there are multiple national champions for those years. So if, let's say, the SEC
True.
in any particular decade had 4 national champions, there weren't necessarily 4 out of 10. They could have been 4 out of 17 because there were multiple teams voted national champions each year.
That's true. That was true, I saw, for some years. And I acknowledge it's a really rough, of course, imperfect estimate. But it does show that the trend in the last 20 years is not consistent with the statistical performance of the SEC in terms of winning the national championship. If you operationalize it as defining, quality based on winning the national title, statistically, the last 20 years have been an anomaly. And then when you add in the changes to college football over the last year or so, I think there's a conference that's going to emerge that's going to challenge the SEC for dominance. I'm wondering if you think that there might be, in fact, who that might be.
Well, and I also do think that the biggest reason for the SEC's surge in the last 20 or 25 years has been population shift. When you take a state like Georgia, that nobody would have thought of 50 to 60 years ago as being more populous than New York, and it will be within the next 15 or 20 years, much of the population has shifted, and many of these schools have become extremely serious about college football as the stakes in terms of money and prestige and attention have increased exponentially in recent decades. So I think that's one of the big reasons why.
I agree, and I think there's a lot of like confounding variables, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I don't think the teams that we're predicting this year that are likely to win are going to win it. I think Notre Dame might be the team this year. I think there's a chance for Notre Dame to come. And I think because when you look at these factors, students, like high school kids, are now going to base their decision on who's giving me the most money. Okay? So that's going to lead to, people going elsewhere other than the traditional powers. With realignment, you're going to see, given the increased competition and schedule, multiple losses for teams that otherwise may have gone undefeated. And I think we're going to see a sea change in college football that is going to happen relatively soon. And I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to be a team that's going to surprise us this year, and ultimately a conference over the next 10 years that's going to surprise us and lead to a decrease in the amount of national champions that the SEC has. And people may disagree.
This year,
yeah.
So I'll speak to this year, and then I'll speak to the future beyond 2024. Your Notre Dame selection, I think, is a pretty solid one. So I released my top 25. That actually makes sense this weekend, and I believe I've got Notre Dame number 6, which truly means I believe that they are the 6th best roster, team, coaching staff, all of it put together in college football. That is not what a lot of people do is they look at the schedule, then they try to figure out who's going to finish number 5, number 6. Mine is simply, I believe they are the 6th best team in college football. So I do think that they're possibly in the running for a national championship. They, of course, have a different route than other teams because they will have to be selected by the committee. They cannot gain a first-round bye or a top 4 seed, so they'll be playing, hopefully for them, at home in a first-round game in December. There was an interesting article, not to go down a side path, but there was an interesting article that I didn't like read word for word, but I skimmed through it by, I believe, AL.com, Alabama.com, where they looked at what would have been the college football playoff games over the last at least 10 seasons, maybe further back than that. Their collection was about 110 college football playoff games that would have been played had the model been 12 games for the last 10 years, and to see what the weather would have been in those locations. And for all the hubbub over weather, which would be a factor, they actually found out that they discovered that rain would have been a bigger factor than snow in December, that there would have only been 7 out of over 100 games where there would have been snow in any way, not huge accumulations. They only found one game that would have been played at Wisconsin with 7 or 8 inches of snow. But most of these games, there would have been 1 or 2 inches, 7 out of over 100. So I thought that was an interesting note. But as we go forward, Adam, I don't think these conferences are going to compete with the SEC and the Big Ten. The Big 12 does not have a program. Deion Sanders in Colorado is a bit of a wild card. Kyle Whittingham just announced here in the last day or two that he's going to be stepping down at Utah here very soon. They've announced his successor, and I'm not saying that the entire program is contingent on Kyle Whittingham, but he has been a major part of their success. I just think that we're in a much different place today than we were just a few years ago, with 4 or 5 of the biggest brands in the sport gravitating to 2 conferences. And now we basically have Clemson and Florida State, possibly Miami, as being schools that are capable of winning national championships that do not reside in the Big Ten or the SEC. And they're most likely going to be, as they are fighting in court, going to be playing in one of those 2 conferences. If you want a real wild card out there, I think that North Carolina has a ton of resources and ability to be a major player if they got serious about football, and maybe they would if they were plucked up by the Big Ten or the SEC, and they most likely will be because they have voiced their concern and their desire to leave the ACC. So that's the first real wild card that comes to mind in the future.
No, I think that's a great point. And the last thing I'll say is I just think that given that the last 20 years, in terms of operationalizing it as winning a national championship, given that the last 20 years has been a statistical anomaly for the SEC over the course of the last century, and given the changes to college football, which I think are going to spread out the talent among different schools and also lead to multiple losses because of that, I think we're going to see some change. Maybe it's not going to be that a conference is going to suddenly be dominant, but I think individual teams might be. And I think this year it could be Notre Dame, and USC is also kind of. I'm not sure about USC, but I think we're going to see a team this year that we're not really talking about win the national championship because of not only the statistical probabilities, but also because of the new changes that make it harder for the existing dominant teams to be successful. But those are just my thoughts. Always good talking to you, and happy 4th of July, of course.
Happy 4th of July, Adam. Always appreciate you coming on here with some great and insightful thoughts about college football.
Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me on.
Good to see Adam here. Always comes prepared. Always comes with some kind of probing question or some type of model for the future, something that he's been looking at. And I found that very entertaining in regards to who could possibly break through that is not of the elite status right now in college football. Who were the last ones to do that? Man, this is going to take me down another path, but we're going to wrap up here at the Voice of College Football. I would say certainly Florida State and Miami in the early 1980s. Anybody since then that has become an elite? No. It was 50 years ago in 1974. Who were the best teams in college football in 1974? Alabama, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas. Sounds pretty familiar. Well, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And again, as you have seen noted throughout the broadcast here, the live stream, that we are looking for hosts and content creators here at the Voice of College Football, whether that be for the Big 12 or the ACC or really anyone. If you love college football and you have a recommendation for us, or you yourself believe that you have what it takes to host and discuss here at the Voice of College Football, we would love to have you here. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Sorry, caller, we are 25 minutes past when I needed to be done. So we appreciate you being here. Look out for these realignment videos. We got another one coming today. I'm going to title it most likely The Best Big 12 Possible. Big 12 fans, I'm going to deliver to you your best conference possible. We'll see you next time.